a good mare, like a world champion mare, looks at the world as important. What was it about her that made her special? It's the grit, it's the heart, it's the try, all those things. What do they do when they got to, haul across the arena and go catch that cow? And how do they handle that stress? And so the way that mare looks at the world, I believe, impacts the foal. And so my favorite yearling that we have is out of Metallicat Rose, who won World's Greatest with John Swales. She cared for that baby, and there's something special about her. And I think a lot of it comes from the boss mare who ran the mare band and how she looked at the world, and her baby sees that leadership.
The Converse Cowboy journey has given me an opportunity to sit down with some amazing performers from all walks of life, where it is my job to tease out their habits and routines so that you can apply and test in your own life. I've learned, I've grown personally, I've been enlightened, and I've been humbled. Above all, I've realized there is no destination in this life, no goal achieved, or money made that can replace the feeling of flow and the pursuit of doing what you truly love to do. With a growth mindset, I'm constantly asking questions and pursuing knowledge. The Converse Cowboy is a platform that allows me to do just that. I'm excited and eager to share their stories with you all. I'm Mike Roberts, and this is the Converse Cowboy.
This episode is brought to you by XIT Ranch and Carrie Kelly Bits and Spurs. I think we could start right here, Drew. I had a lot of fun doing some research for this interview and went down the XIT rabbit trail and found the story of XIT just to be fascinating. And I want to hear your version of it, but the highlights of it. XIT began in 1885. The ranch owned over 3 million acres, which blows my mind.
Hard to believe.
Along the New Mexico border, it ran for 200 miles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there was the fact that the ranch itself was heavily involved with the building of the state capitol. I'd love to hear you just drop some knowledge on XIT Ranch, how it began, and all of the things.
Yes, sir. There's an incredible history associated with the founding of the ranch. And in my mind, what's really incredible is just how creative the Texans were back then when they were faced with a problem. So the state capitol building burned down, and the state was land rich but cash poor. And so they came up with a creative solution to trade the land in return for a new state capitol building. And at this point in time, the Farwell brothers were living in Chicago, running their wholesale dry goods business.
And for context, that would have been what, your great-great-great-grandfather of one of the Farwell brothers?
Third great, yes, sir.
Third great,
yep.
Okay.
So John V. Farwell is my third great-grandfather, and his brother, Charles B. Farwell, served in both the House and the Senate. And the best I can figure out, Senator Maxey from Texas probably told Charles B. at the time about the land deal. And they'd been running cattle in Indian territory, and they also had contemporaries in Chicago, the Armours and the Swifts and everybody like that, who were part of the packing and shipping industry. And so they saw an opportunity to make a trade. They backed one of the bids, or actually two of the bids, for the new Capitol building, and one of those was chosen. And there were a couple of other partners at that point in time as well. And when you think about it and what that building is, it was an incredible testament to the size and the scale of the effort. It's an absolutely gorgeous building. The granite that is here from the state of Texas is just unbelievable. It's an absolutely iconic building, and the Goddess of Liberty is at the peak. And that building is actually taller than the Capitol in Washington, D.C. So Texans always go big, which is pretty cool. Even back then, they were doing it. And so as various construction hurdles were met, land started to be released as a part of that transaction. And the Farwell brothers spent their own money to build it, but then they receive title to 3 million acres of raw wild land up in the Panhandle. There were no railroad lines. There was nothing, absolutely nothing. And so they had to figure out how to develop the ranch and how to pay to stock it. And so they were having trouble getting dirt loans at that point in time. Unless something was quoted on a stock exchange, nobody was lending on it. And they had business interests in Europe because of the wholesale dry goods business. And so John V spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to raise money over there. And it was quite the struggle. But in the end, they were able to sell bonds over in the UK, which then went to fund the ranching operations. And the collateral for it was the title of the land in the Panhandle. And when you look at this, it's kind of interesting because in today's context of investing, I'd call this a global macro trade. They borrowed in sterling, converted it back into US dollars. They ran their business, and eventually land was sold to be converted into dollars, then back into sterling, pay off the bondholders. And best I can figure out with the help of some of the historians that focus on the ranch's history is they probably had title to 1 million acres free and clear by the time they were done with that. So it's a pretty incredible history. And like you said, in 1885, the first 2,500 head of Longhorns were delivered to the Buffalo Springs Division, which is about 30 miles outside of Dalhart and not too far from where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
The last of the original acreage was sold by my family in 1963. And so Abby and I started ranching in Colorado in 2020. And then we repurchased part of the Rita Blanca division in 22. And so there was a 59-year slumber, hiatus, however you want to think about it. And when we turned out XIT branded cattle on XIT land back in 22, it was a pretty special moment.
Describe that feeling, yeah.
Oh, man. We had spent a week gathering and sorting and getting the loads lined out to go from the ranch in Colorado down to there, which is only about 3.5, 4 hours away. People don't realize how close Colorado and Texas are, southern Colorado specifically. And we started shipping pots down there. And when we received the first load of cattle, it was just an incredible moment. I mean, what a blessing in our lives to have the opportunity to do that.
Oh, yeah.
And, it all goes back to Abby when we were early dating, when she'd say things like, I just want to own land. It's like, I like you. I like how you think. And, she's a chef. And so she always worked with farmers and ranchers when she would put on events and whatnot. And she wanted to have her own beef. And so in, I don't know, maybe 2016 or 17, we started down the road of trying to buy a ranch and finally got one bought in 20.
Right on.
But really, Abby's been a big part of the driving force the whole way through. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty awesome to have her be such a big part of that. She's so passionate about it.
So once upon a time, I read somewhere that the XIT was running around 150,000 head of cattle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any desire to get back anywhere close to those numbers? Or how about this? Do you have any desire to acquire more previously XIT owned land?
We would love the opportunity to expand. That'd be great. I think when you look at the Panhandle, it's an incredible place for ranching and farming. There's a lot of really good ground there. There's a ton of amazing people up there that have been making livings for their families for such a long period of time. And so many of them are responsible for keeping the XIT alive during the time period when my family wasn't involved. And they deserve a ton of credit for that. And as generational changes happen, maybe there will be an opportunity to get some more land up there. That'd be great. We would love that. But right now, you're a business and investing guy. You hear people talk about digesting acquisitions, and so we're still digesting that acquisition and really getting a good handle on that land, how best to run cattle on that land. And we have a lot of great help from people like the Browns, Rob A. Brown, his son R.A., and whatnot, who are phenomenal cattlemen who are teaching us how they run cattle in that area. And so things are going pretty good up there. We could use a little bit more rain, but
yeah, always,
love to do that. And we're just, we're willing to be patient and wait for the right thing though. And that was a part of getting that piece of the Rita Blanca back, was being patient. I mean, I could have bought some scrub ground if I really wanted a PO box in that area at any point in time, but we really wanted it to have historical significance. And the ranch's headquarters was in Channing, and that building still stands today. Beautiful Victorian red brick building. And the fact that the land that Abby and I purchased has an original windmill that's been in continuous operation since they punched it all those years ago is pretty special. Mm-hmm. There are buildings that were built in 1889 on that property that are still there today. And so in a lot of ways, you know, we always want to honor the past and the history and to be able to do right by it. And this piece of ground was particularly special for a number of reasons.
Right. I'm curious to know, man, how does a guy from Ohio, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does a guy from Ohio, it sounded like Abby played a crucial role in like pushing you towards this ranching route, but how do you decide, I want to like revive the XIT brand and go down this road? Because you were doing what at the time? Trading stocks or financial planning?
Right. Yeah. So I had a career in the money management business. And so I always really liked looking at various alternative asset classes. And when one thing's doing well, another thing might not be doing well. You know, diversification is important, and land is something that I've always found really interesting. And I pay attention to a lot of different markets. It's just, I enjoy it. And so that piece all kind of fit together, you know, way to diversify and all these other things. I'd love to sit here, Mike, and tell you that we had some grand plan to do exactly what we're doing, but we didn't. We just wanted to be good stewards of the land and raise beef and care for it. It wasn't that we set out that we're going to do all these different things. It was just an evolution over time. And recently I was asked to write something for a book about the why behind us doing this. And what I believe and what Abby believes is that God called us to be the stewards of the XIT in today's era. And, you know, it's kind of like you're going down the road and you're on your path, and then all of a sudden you end up making a turn that you weren't expecting. I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it, just because it's had such a profound impact on our lives, and it's been so positive in so many ways. And I have tons of family members that could have done it before us, but for whatever reason, we were the ones that were called on to do this.
That's what I'm curious. Like, as when you were growing up as a kid, was the XIT like something that your family spoke about?
Yeah. So somebody's asked me before the first time I heard the story, and the best I can remember, I was around 11 years old at Thanksgiving, and I was bored out of my mind, and I went to the bookshelf in the living room, and it's Tarzan and all that kind of stuff, and I've read that a bunch, and there's a book that I see, and it has XIT on the binding, and I asked my dad about it, and he said, "Oh, there's a ranch our family used to have. You should go ask your grandmother about it." And so I went and I talked to her, and she started telling me about it, and I just have to imagine my jaw was on the floor at the time hearing about it, and I didn't really understand what 5 acres was, let alone 3 million. It just sounded really big.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad's mother is the connection to the Farwells. It was always something that the family was really proud of, but you know, this is the early 1990s. It's a pretty long time away from when the ranch was in operation. And so it was something that we were proud of. And I remember my dad saying that he wanted to go get his picture taken in front of the Capitol building in Austin. And in 2019, I took my family there, and I've got a picture of us in front of the Capitol building, which is pretty special to me. And I think the kids thought I was just making it all up to start. I mean,
it does sound like a fairy tale story.
Exactly.
Like something you'd see in the movies.
Yeah. And then on that campus where the Capitol building is, there's a little museum, and I think it's the southeast corner. And they have pictures of the Farwells and all that kind of stuff. And so then they realized that Dad wasn't making it up, and definitely didn't expect for a lot of this stuff to happen. But a lot of pieces have fallen into place. So many people have been supportive and helped us along the way. The heritage ranches that have been in continuous operation have welcomed us back with open arms and helped us whether it's on the cattle side, the horse side, how to think about this issue or that issue. And we're very lucky that people appreciate the hard task that we've taken on, and they want to help. We wouldn't be here without them.
Yeah, that's so cool to hear.
Yeah.
So cool to hear. I'm curious to know about the brand. From what I read, it was the XIT was a brand that was hard to like change, for theft. But what does XIT stand for?
That's a great question. That's one we get all the time. Cade Shepard asked me that the other day, actually, at Super Steaks. So the legend holds that XIT stands for 10 in Texas, the X being Roman numeral 10. And it's very easy to see how imaginative minds would have thought that, given that the ranch covered all or part of 10 counties at its peak, at its heyday. Not to disappoint anybody, but there were 9 counties in 1885, and the 10th was subdivided later after the brand was already in use. But Abner Blocker was the trail driver that brought those 2,500 head of Longhorns to Buffalo Springs, and Barbecue Campbell, the manager at the time, was asked, "What's your brand? You got to brand them." And he said, "Well, we don't have one." He said, "Well, what do you think?" He goes, Ab says, "It needs to look good and sound good, be easy to put on and hard to change." And so he went over in the corral with his boot heel and came up with a 3-character brand, XIT, and nobody could figure out how to alter it. And so that became the brand and the name of the ranch. That would have been July of 1885. It was originally done with a 5-inch running iron. And so it's 5 hits of a running iron. And if the T was, kind of like that, you could actually alter it into a star with a cross in the center of it. But the top of the T had to be a little crooked. And when you're branding 35,000 head of cattle a year, they're going to be a couple. The Cowboys, everybody tries as hard as they can to do it. But at that volume, mathematically, you're just going to have some aberration, right? And so they ended up, using the XIT, and it became this bigger than life thing. And so with the legend of 10 in Texas, we had some fun with it and named one of our horses that way. And we get a kick out of that stuff. We love using historical references in horse names. So the mare that shows in the cow horse, her name's Rita Blanca, which is after the division that we're in. And there were 8 divisions originally. And so we have fun with that.
That is cool, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to something you said a minute ago. It seems like you and your wife just showed up, and the intention was just to acquire land, and then one door opened and y'all went through that one and then did the thing, and then another door, bigger door, seems like they opened. And I'm reading a book right now called Greatness Cannot Be Planned. And it's interesting for me to read because I'm very much like about setting an intention and manifesting your dreams and having objectives. And this book essentially doesn't say that that's bullshit. It kind of, what I'm getting from it is it's like, be open to what you may not have planned.
Right.
Be open to the doors that may lie there that you don't even know about yet, that could lead to some really cool experiences. So I'm going to tie this in to your college degree, which was philosophy, right? Or did you have a minor in philosophy?
No, I majored in philosophy.
Majored in philosophy.
Yeah,
so,
which really means at that point in my life, I resigned myself to poverty and sitting in a cafe sipping espresso in a black mock turtleneck or something like that. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I was interested in it. So yeah, I might look at things a little bit differently because of that background.
Yeah, I'm curious to know how that background and studying of philosophy plays a role in what you're doing today.
I think it plays a really big role in it. When I look at the world, I believe that thinking is a superpower, and it's one that you can hone and make sharper. And so if you take critical thinking and analysis very seriously, it can create a lot of opportunity that other people might not see. And so I believe that if you're very well read and studied, then all of a sudden these disparate pieces can come together to form a vision to help you understand where you need to go. And you might not understand what this piece has to do with this piece over here, but it's being aware of all of them. And then when the timing's right, something good can happen.
I agree 100%.
I think life is, 85% preparation and 15% luck or opportunity or openness to what could be that you might not understand.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think I do the same thing. Like I got heavy into Stoic philosophy and just the spiritual side of being a human.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, well, what does that mean? It's like understanding that we have this mind that is controlling this thing called our mind, which is crazy that this tool sharpens the same tool, right? And just being aware of that is like puts you light years ahead of just living this unconscious life, I feel like.
Yeah. And epistemology, the theory of knowledge, is something that I was always really intrigued by. And once you admit you know nothing, you know something. And that's the foundation.
Yeah.
And
Who was
so
that? Was that Aristotle?
Descartes,
Okay.
I believe. Somebody fact checked that on me. But, I think therefore I am, I believe it was Aristotle.
Okay.
And so Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Nietzsche, all these different schools, ancient Western, existential, there's so many wonderful fields within it. And so when you get a foundation and thinking about things in that context, it's pretty interesting because when you in college, when you write a paper for your philosophy professor, you not only argue your point, but you have to argue the opposite, what would disprove what you're trying to say. So you really have to think about it from all sides and ask yourself a lot of really hard questions. And so I always try to ask myself, what am I missing? What don't I understand? Who are other people that I can ask about this that have a different point of view than me? You don't want a bunch of people with tinfoil hats all agreeing on the same thing.
Yeah.
Go find the person with the differential point of view and really try to understand that.
Yeah, and have a conversation about it, not just live in this echo chamber of
right
belief and confirmation bias.
Exactly.
How was that hard for you to do initially?
That's a good question. I gravitated towards it pretty quickly. I took a summer course in philosophy after my freshman year of college, and I think that was the one that really launched me. I thought I was going to be an English major to start because I love reading and writing, and I've authored a number of white papers, finance stuff that's pretty boring for most people, but I really enjoy writing. It's something that I've always enjoyed. And so those big long papers that I had to write, I didn't mind because it was a form of mental gymnastics and it was interesting to me. I probably struggled with it if you went back and looked at some of those early papers. Instead of taking exams for your finals, you have to write 4 10-page papers back to back. You get pretty good at it.
Oh, wow. I'm curious to know, I asked this question, I feel like just about on every interview, but what is like a practice or something that you do when you get overwhelmed?
I focus on my breath and I check in with my body. And so I believe that our bodies can tell us a lot about how we're feeling. Is my chest tight? Is my skin crawling? What's going on here? How do I feel? And I've found that focusing on my breath slows it down and helps me have the space to be able to figure it out. But you can't always think your way out of something. And this is kind of weird, but I believe you also have to sometimes feel your way out of it. And that checking in with your body and how you're doing is pretty important. If you feel like your hair's on fire, then something's wrong. And you got to pay attention to it. And how are you going to figure that out? You can't figure it out if you're running around because your hair's on fire. You got to slow down and take a minute to figure that out.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I guess that would be a similar answer for me, because it's when you focus on your breath, you're now focusing on this present moment and your brain's not jumping to the future or to the past.
And prayer and meditation have been very powerful for me as well. Praying about it or sitting quietly and meditating on it can
What
be
type
very
of meditation
helpful.
are you doing?
Just quiet, focusing on breath. Breathe in, know you're breathing in. Breathe out, know you're breathing out, to all the way to guided meditation. Yep. And so I think meditation is a very powerful tool. And just like I said earlier about thinking being a superpower, our mind can unlock a lot of stuff that maybe we're not aware of.
Sometimes I feel like early when I first started on that, I think it's like a very uncomfortable conversation with yourself, just sitting in room by yourself, no noise, no TV, no radio,
Mm-hmm.
no text, no social.
And bringing your mind back when it wanders, back to, if you have a mantra that you're focusing on
Yeah.
for whatever it is that you're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Your mind wanders, bringing it back, not just going down that rabbit hole.
Well, there's that, but I feel like that's the reason why most people, I know for me, like early on, and anybody listening who's trying to get into meditation or like saying, oh, like it's not for me, I would encourage you to listen to this. Like when your mind does wander, because it will, that's part of it. Like you're not doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I hear that a lot. How do I know I'm doing it right?
Yeah.
Well, when you noticed your mind running off, like you're doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
You just bring it back to the present moment.
Yep.
And then you do it again, and then you do it again. And it's just expanding your awareness to those thoughts.
That's a great way to think about it, for sure.
Yeah. And again, I always say this too, I am no guru. So I am not trying to tell anybody how to do their thing, but that's just what's worked for me. And that's the question I hear a lot though, is, oh, how do I know I'm doing it right? What is it?
Well, and, I've heard people get frustrated if they fell asleep while they were meditating or something like that. And kind of my point of view on that is you were in that relaxed of a state where that happened. So you were doing it. Just get back and keep going.
You know what pisses me off is when I fall asleep when I'm getting a massage. I'm like, fuck, I missed 45 minutes in this hour. I fell asleep. It seems like y'all acquired a very high caliber stud very quickly from getting in the game. And this is outside looking in.
Mm-hmm.
You could have been in way longer than what I know, but how long, I guess that's a good way to start it. A good way to ask it is, how did you come about acquiring Kit Kat Sugar?
We first bought a couple of show horses. They were ran cow horse. And
what year would this have been?
This would have been 21 or 22.
Okay.
Early 22, maybe. It must have been January of 22. Yeah. Because I remember seeing Matt Cook at the National Western Stock Show in Denver. And that was when I met him for the first time. And Dustin Ewing from Wagon Hound had a horse with him. We know Wagon Hound really well. And I told Dustin I saw Matt show his horse. And he said, oh, you should go meet him. And Matt's in the cool down pen. And here's some guy trying to introduce himself, and I'm sure Matt's just like, oh, who's this guy? And I couldn't blurt out fast enough that I knew Dustin. And so Matt's place in Colorado is not too far from the ranch in La Vita, and we went up there and we've worked with Matt ever since. And Matt really, and some of those horses like Sparkles, really put our program on the map in the cow horse, which is really incredible. So that would have been January of 22. And so, we'd been breeding horses for a year or two and paying a lot of stud fees out, which gets expensive. And me being a financial operator, I look at things on a bottom line, on a P&L. And so I looked at it and said, well, geez, if we owned a stud and you're selling contracts, then you have that income coming in, and then you can breed that stud to your mares, and that doesn't really cost a whole lot. And then I learned about the depreciation rules around that as well, and that was pretty exciting for me. Most people find that kind of stuff boring, but you're a real estate guy, you know a lot about depreciation and how great that is when it comes tax season. And so I had modeled 4 or 5 different studs that I liked, that I thought would be a good fit for where we were trying to go. And Kit Kat Sugar was one of those studs. And one day I got a phone call saying that he was for sale, and was asking if I was interested. And I said, yeah, I'm interested in him. We already owned a bridle mare by him. We'd already been breeding to him.
I'm going to stop you real quick.
Yeah.
Drew. How does that work? So you have a roster of 4 to 5 that you're interested in. Do you then reach out to those stud owners to see if you can buy them?
I never reached out to anybody, any of those stud owners. There was a bloodstock agent that we were working with at the time that kind of knew that we might be interested if the right opportunity ever came up, but I never proactively reached out to anybody about it.
Can you name any of the other 4 to 5 that you're looking at?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I think Don't Stop Believin' was on the list. I've always really liked that horse, and the Raps have done a great job.
Hell of a job, yeah.
With him, and liked his conformation, things like that, and his pedigree. Stevie Ray Vaughan was probably on it, but I probably viewed him as an unattainable one. After Alvin had sold Metallic Cat and he was doing such a great job with Stevie, why would he ever want to sell a great horse like that? Alvin's probably the best stallion promoter that there ever was. And so we had a short list, and you can use the AQHA publicly available information to see how many foals they register every year and things like that. So I could do a little modeling. And then once we said we wanted to come down and look at them, then I could fill in the blanks on the number of contracts and whatnot. And so I was ready to move pretty quick. And that's where I believe being ready puts you in position to make a good capital allocation decision. And this has been a very good capital allocation decision for us. And so I think we wrapped up that deal in about 5 days, and nobody even knew he was for sale.
Wow.
And so that was right before the run for $1 million that year.
Who owned him, Drew? Who did y'all buy him?
The Allsups.
Allsups.
Yep. The Allsups had him, and they did a great job with him. Pete Branch trained and showed him, and horse of the year. And you look back at his 4-year-old year, and he more or less won everything, or was reserve champion. He and Hoddish were hauling against each other that year. It was a heck of a race. They even went to Calgary that year. And they would haul in the same trailer together.
Oh, really?
And whatnot. And so just a really well-built horse. And his Grandam, Little Badger Dulcie, is maybe the number 11 winningest horse in the sport of cutting. She won 660,000, 680,000, something like that, which in that era was a ton of money, and there were no incentives back then. So she really crushed it. And she, I believe, might have been the first ever NCHA horse of the year.
Oh, wow.
And then Skeet was horse of the year. And, we were cheering for Matt Gaines and Sugar Daddy this past year to win horse of the year, to kind of tie that all together. And they got third. They did such a great year. They did phenomenal. And so it's really been incredible. But, when my financial operator brain kicks in on something like that, it's looking at the total return, the after-tax return. So that what is the depreciation benefit, which at that point in time, it was 100% bonus depreciation in that year. It's 40% this year. It's been going down by 20% a year recently. But
where would one go to find out all about that? If they're not a money manager, how do they find out about stud horse depreciation and all of the benefits of owning a stud horse?
I think the thoroughbred industry is probably kind of the leader in people understanding that sort of stuff. But there's a tax firm that we use that has an equine division, and they've got some stuff online available to where you can figure some of this stuff out, which they weren't originally my tax counsel, but the person that has worked for us for 9-10 years, she moved to that firm, and that was a bonus when she moved. But people look at whether it's multifamily real estate or maybe even stallion ownership. Oh, there's this passive income. These breedings just wash over the transom of your boat and you're doing great. But you got to work as a stallion owner. At least I do. And I love meeting mare owners and talking to them and developing relationships with them, because I believe we're in the relationship business, and they think our stud can help them meet their program goals. And sometimes a mare owner will call and we'll talk about their mare. And if it's not the right fit, I actually might, tell them I'm not so sure that's the best cross for your mare. And people are kind of flabbergasted when I do that. But I believe a good transaction is profitable to both parties. And I want them to get the colt that's going to help them do what it is that they're passionate about, meet their objectives. And so, in fact, some of the mare owners that I've come to know are some of my best friends now. And, there's a couple guys that I talk to multiple times a week that we just met through, they called to talk about their mare. And we've become really good friends. And that's a big bonus for me is the relationships.
That's really cool. Yeah. And that's something that is consistent with, I had an opportunity to interview Alvin Foltz for a stallion project, and that seemed to be like his key to success. One of his keys to success was just the communication with customers and developing those relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And if those mare owners feel like you're behind them, that's a big deal. And if you look at the arena, there Will Rogers, you see all the stallion logos on the boards. That's not there for me. That's actually there for the mare owners. That's us being behind them and promoting their horse. And all the reels that we do, we do reels for the open guys, we do and gals, and we even do reels for amateurs and non-pros. We celebrate everybody, and we have people that are competing at whatever their level is that have chosen Kit Kat Sugar, you know, and so we want to honor that, and we really enjoy it. And so then I'll go at a weekend show and see somebody that maybe we did a reel for or something like that, and go introduce myself if I don't know them. And it's really been fun.
That's cool. What is he at right now? How much
he just hit
has he produced?
He just hit 13 million.
13 million.
13 million. Yeah.
Wow.
So pretty incredible. And so much credit goes to the Allsups and to Pete. They did such a great job getting him on good mares early on. And when you look at the body of work, I think he was at 6 or 6.5 million when we bought him. And in the last couple of years, they've just done incredibly well. And so since we bought him, the oldest full crop that is their yearlings right now. So they'll be getting started as 2-year-olds next year. And so we're really excited to have his influence now really work its way into the program, and not just the performance horse side, but on the ranch horse side of things too. And when we started out on that, we really wanted to make an XIT horse. You know, if you go to the Return to the Remuda sale, you can look at a Sixes horse and know it's a Sixes horse, or, you know, Tongue River or King Ranch or whomever. You know, they have their horse that they've designed for them to be successful based on their terrain and what their needs are and everything else. And so we've worked very hard to be thoughtful about, well, what do we need for the type of terrain that we have, the job that these horses need to do. And so it's not just about the original bloodstock and those babies that came from those mares. It's about, you know, say having a Kit Kat daughter and then taking our Rain Cow Horse Stud Cowboys code back on top and making an XIT Ranch horse.
That's cool.
Yeah. So we try to be very forward thinking about multiple generations when we make our breeding decisions.
Right on. If folks are interested in breeding to him, where he's standing at the Sixes right now?
That's right. Yep. Kit Kat Sugar stands at the Sixes, and we're very blessed that he's booked full this year. ICSI's still available, but you know, he's in a lot of ways his babies help sell him, right? You know, or in the majority of ways his babies help sell him. And with what so many great trainers, whether it's Monty with Cat Play or Matt with Sugar Daddy, the list goes on, Justin Wright and Scooter Cat, there's so many great horses, Haven Medjed and For Goodness Shakes in the tie down. And so, you know, we've got top tier horses in cutting, roping, and cow horse all at the same time, which is pretty special.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Yeah.
What would you say, Drew, is the one thing that all great breeding programs have in common?
A dedication to their mare band. I think when you look at a lot of the great programs, it was a commitment to their mares. It was a commitment to breeding them the right way. And on the performance side, making sure then those babies get in the right hands and have the best opportunity that they can have. But good conformation, good feet, and a good mind go a long way. And a lot of people will tell you that the mare's 65% of the equation. You know, that's the mother. They carry that baby, they nurse that baby and everything. And so when we started our breeding program up again, we focused on mares. And I believe that it's the mare band that does it, and the commitment to their mares.
Right on. I'm always curious to know, man, like how much influence do the recips have on the babies?
So we talk about that all the time. You know, we've had some that are pretty crazy, and we just try not to let the baby know that her mom's crazy. And you know, but there's a big nature versus nurture debate here, and they are a prey animal, so those babies can stand and run away within an hour of being born. So how much nurture is there if they have that ingrained to be able to stand up and run away so quick? And we've had some of those babies with a crazy recip be totally fine and normal and never would have known. But I believe that the way that a good mare, like a world champion mare, looks at the world is important. what was it about her that made her special? It's the grit, it's the heart, it's the try, all those things. What do they do when they got to, haul across the arena and go catch that cow? And how do they handle that stress? And so the way that mare looks at the world, I believe, impacts the foal. And so my favorite yearling that we have is out of Metallicat Rose, who won World's Greatest with John Swales. She cared for that baby, and there's something special about her. And I think a lot of it comes from the boss mare who ran the mare band and how she looked at the world, and her baby sees that leadership and the care for the other horses that are in that mare band.
Yeah.
And so for me, I do think that that's really important. You can't control, unless you own your own recip, you can't really control it. And sometimes it's the roll of the dice, but we've been pretty lucky where more often than not, we don't have one that's too hard to deal with. But we also work really hard to gentle those ones down. So then they're, halter broke and lead them around. We make life good for them so that they want to be around us and not be afraid of us when they see us show up with a halter.
I mentioned I did a deal on the stallions that shaped the cutting horse industry a few years ago, and I've been playing with the idea of doing the same thing for brood mares. So if you could name like the top 5 that you would put into that category, would want to see like a highlight reel of who would the top 5 brood mares be? Because I agree with you, the brood mares are the foundation of all.
And there's certain mares that have had such a huge impact on our sport, and whether it's Showbiz Kitty, Stylish Play Lena, Royal Blue Boon, there's so many good ones. Sweet Abra, they're a great list of incredible mares that, Showbiz, for example, you can cross her with just about anything and it seems to be able to work, right? Yeah. And then you take Abra and the Metallic Cat cross over and over again, worked. And so you have these you have these differences between them and how they were successful. And so I think that would be a great video that people would absolutely love to see. And, to be able to get some of those genetics in your program can be pretty highly sought after. We really wanted Special New Baby in our program, and, we went out and got that. And we really wanted a Lizzie's Got a Player mare. And I went on a quest to get one of those in the program, and so on and so forth. So I think there are a lot of great mares that you could choose from, and you probably couldn't go wrong with any number of them.
Yeah. I know you study like the nuances of breedings and bloodlines. Is there a cross out there that hasn't been done that you would like to see done?
That's a good question. Jack Wagner's come up a couple of times recently just for a lot of the line breeding that he did and had a lot of success with. And he was very forward thinking about line breeding. So there have been a number of things that people have done over the years that somebody else maybe wouldn't have done, but they're trying to push the envelope. When you look at trying to figure something out that people haven't seen or understood yet, sometimes I see something out there that I really like that I want to try. And there was a Lizzie's Got a Player daughter that was bred to Kit Kat Sugar, for example. And then I believe that mare was then bred to I'm Counting Checks. And so you have this line breeding, a smart little ricochet in there. And so I wanted to do the inverse of it. So, go find an I'm Counting Checks daughter, and, that could be pretty neat. And people don't always think about him necessarily, but he's on Skeet's papers. So it obviously was pretty special for him. And so maybe there's something to trying to do a little bit of line breeding on a stud that maybe isn't as popular for that type of thing. And there aren't as many of those out there, but there's some things you could try.
Right. I'm curious to know, man. So you picked up 2 really nice 2-year-olds this past year at the Western Bloodstock sale at the Futurity. And when I always nerd out, as most people do, I think, when that damn catalog that looks like a phone book comes out.
It's gotten pretty big.
Yeah, and Jeremy Barwick does a really good job with that sale, and it's always something to look forward to. But I'm curious to know, what is your process whenever it comes to that? Like when that book comes out, how do you study that? How do you go through and pick your top picks?
Usually there's a hole that I'm trying to fill. So there's a filter right off the bat with a hole that I'm trying to fill, whether it's I need this type of broodmare or I'm looking for a show prospect or whatever. So I have that as an initial filter. But apart from that, I honestly don't really look at the stud on the pedigree when I'm starting. I look at who the mother is, and I start with the maternal genetics. And again, it goes back to, I think that has an inordinate impact on the resulting foal. So I generally, after I start that first filter of whatever it is I'm looking for, I generally am focusing on that mare. And it's hard too, because the industry places such a preference on, the mare won a bunch of money herself. She comes from a big producer, all these different things, in which really what you're trying to do is increase the odds and probabilities of a successful outcome, strong history of success. And in the finance world, they tell you that past performance is not indicative of future results and have these disclaimers, but we have an unregulated industry. And I do believe that history rhymes. But when we're trying to find something, we're going to focus on the maternal genetics as a part of our filtering process. And at least for us, we are going to have a preference if we're looking for a show prospect to try to find one that's by our stud as well. There was a beautiful bay filly by our stud out of Ray and Hickory that was in the 2-year-old sale this year that I would have loved to have owned, but she wasn't going to be the best fit for where we were trying to go. And so loved that mare. She was beautiful, very cow smart, but it ended up being that the 2-year-olds that we bought were studs. And one of them is out of a dual ray mare, and dual ray is Skeet's #1 cross, 2.9 million. And I don't know, 47,000 average production on those. You can't really miss with a dual ray mare. And then the other one is out of Bittersweet, who's a metallic cat mare, Chad's good mare that he was.
Chad Bouchaw,
that he won non-pro horse of the year on her, I believe. And she's been a good producer so far. And we had seen how much we really liked the Kit Kat Sugar on a metallic cat daughter cross. And so I think that shares shadow piece with the Pepto Boonsmall is an important part of that. And then you're doing a little bit of line breeding to cat. And so you've seen snaffle bit finalists like this past year. Ricky Nicolazzi made the snaffle bit finals on his horse that was that cross, and so we've started to see it more and more, and we really liked it. And who also doesn't like a roan? That's pretty. That doesn't hurt. Honestly, Mike, we couldn't decide which one between the two of them. They were that good, and it was that hard to tell. Mm-hmm. So instead of taking a rifle shot, we took a shotgun approach. And both up. Now we've got these two amazing horses, and they're coming along great as 3-year-olds, and we're pretty excited about them. But both of those horses came from Crown Ranch, and so Crown Ranch is, as an owner, won over $4.5 million. Chad, has had an incredible career, and he's got a bunch of really good horses. So I was happy to have both of them come from that program.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool, man. I'm going to read a quote. I don't know what interview this came from, but it kind of ties in everything that you just said, and it goes back to the beginning of whenever you got into this whole ranching thing. You say, if we don't wake up every morning and ask ourselves what's best for the XIT Ranch, the land and the animals, and as soon as we start asking what's best for ourselves, we've lost sight of what we're doing and everything falls apart. Can you speak to that and like where that intention comes from?
The core of that quote comes from my strong belief in stewardship and being selfless. And so growing up, my dad always had a lot of great nuggets of wisdom. And then the first 5 years of my money management career, I spent working for him. And then I left and started my own firm and went and did my own thing. But early in my career, he said something when some client relationship changed. I forget what happened, whether the account left or the patriarch passed away and the money got carved up. I forget what happened, but he said, Drew, the money's always in motion, and it's our job to do the best we can while it's our turn to take care of it for them.
Mm.
And so I got to thinking about that some more. And so when you look at life, even a broodmare, my job is to manage her career the best I can while it's my turn to do that. And she might not be able to help me with my program at a certain point later. And I need to help her get to where she can be most successful. And so it's being a good steward of the land and the animals, and having that core as your main focus, and doing whatever it takes to help that be successful. And if we do a good job of all those things, then we will be successful. But if we prioritize our success first, we're going to fail, because then we're outcome oriented. We're not process oriented. And when I was watching this one interview, which I did send to you on YouTube, between Tony Deaton and Grant Williams, which is one of my all-time favorite interviews. Tony talks about, I don't know if it was Anton Fiavet or who it was, but kind of like this rock wall behind me over here. He said, this guy said, I found myself in front of this wall that my family built and generations before me. And it's my job to mend it in a few spots where it needs fixing, and add a few bricks to it or a few stones to it, and to make it better for the next generation. And that's how I feel about what we're doing with everything that we do. It's our turn to be the stewards today. And part of that job is also to raise my 2 daughters in such a way that when it's their turn for that responsibility, that they're able to rise to that, and for them to be good stewards, and it'll be their turn. And if Abby and I do a good job being good stewards, they're going to understand what that means.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's beautiful. I think that's a good place to wrap it. But before we do, I'm curious to know what's next for the XIT Ranch.
Oh, there's so many great things and great opportunities that come up. I'm really excited for Abby, because she has been such a champion for food production over the years. And she's hosted a 5-dinner series called Trust Your Food Source. And she would bring in a farmer or rancher to talk about how they produce their vegetables or their lamb or their beef, and help people understand where their food comes from.
So to give some context to that, I read that, and I'm curious to hear your definition. So Abby, your wife, is a cordon bleu chef.
That's right.
What exactly does that mean?
So she went to culinary school. She went to the Le Cordon Bleu program in Portland, Oregon. So after we graduated from college, we went out to Oregon for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And then she went into fine dining to work at a French restaurant afterwards. French cooking, a lot of butter, all the good stuff. And so her style really, I'd say, is, an adaptation of classical French cuisine with the American West. If I had to, kind of give name to that, she might disagree. But she loves making rabbit confit and, pâtés and bone marrow. And she loves whole animal cooking. And since we're a beef producer, she's done a great job of sharing that with people, and people get excited about it and want to learn. She hosted a butchery event here a little while ago, which was absolutely phenomenal. And she's got an event coming up at the Bowie House in June where they're going to cook XIT beef, and she's going to come in and talk about how we raise beef and what's important to us, and how this steak on your plate came to be.
Yeah, that's cool. The Bowie House in Fort Worth.
The Bowie
That's
House
awesome,
in Fort
man.
Worth.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure listeners are like, you fool, you don't know what a cordon bleu chef is. But I'm sure there's some listeners out there that didn't know. But yeah, I knew it sounded legit, whatever that was. So
yeah, when she went to culinary school in Portland, it was a lot of fun because she was learning all these new techniques, and then she'd come home and try them out
that's so
at
cool.
home, which was pretty fun. But the culinary school is a great foundation, but there's really no replacement for learning in a real restaurant, a real kitchen.
It's funny you say that, man. I actually wrote down another quote, and it was by Abby, and it says, "Of course you can study and read, but you really make progress by doing."
Yep.
And I think
100%.
that applies to anything.
Yeah, definitely. And she's a great example of that in all aspects of her life, whether it comes to her horsemanship or it comes to pulling a calf. You only learn by doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, what do you think, buddy? You want to roll into some rapid fires and then
Hit
get
me
you out of here?
Yeah.
What is your favorite Western movie?
My favorite Western movie, gosh, I loved Django Unchained.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
Yeah, that
a good
one's
one.
pretty good.
Some damn good actors in that one.
Yeah.
What is a book that you either gift most to other people or reread most?
My favorite book, and I've given it a lot, is A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Tolls. And it's a great book about not being defined by your circumstances. Count Rostov goes under house arrest and has to live in the Metropole Hotel for the rest of his life during the Bolshevik Revolution in Moscow in the early 1900s. And it's amazing how big his world became, even though he was confined to a single hotel. And Amor's writing is just absolutely unbelievable. I soak up every word, and I love giving that book out.
That's cool. Have you read A Man's Search for Meaning?
I have not.
Sounds very similar.
Yeah.
By Viktor Frankl. He's a Holocaust survivor.
Oh, yeah. I'll have to read that one
Sounds very
too.
similar. It's good.
Yeah.
If you could go to any time period for 1 week, when and where do you go?
Going back to the Panhandle in the mid 1880s and seeing what those people had, what they were up against and how they dealt with it, I think would be incredible, because the strength and the fortitude that they had to have to do what they did is just unbelievable. And I don't think we truly understand how easy we have it compared to then. I mean, I got pasture maps coming out of my ears right now. and these guys, if they had to get a message from one part of the ranch to the other, someone had to get on a horse and go deliver it. Yeah. I think that'd be pretty neat to go see.
What is the last thing you Googled?
The last thing I Googled? Oh, that's a good question. A lot of times I punch that stuff into Chat GPT these days. The last thing I Googled was a field hockey tournament in Florida that's over Thanksgiving that my daughter wants to go do with her club field hockey team. So I was trying to figure out when and where that was.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because the coach kind of mentioned it, and I want to support my daughter's interest in field hockey.
That's cool. This isn't a question I had written down, but this guy gets brought up every interview, and he hasn't been brought up yet, so I'll make sure to bring him up. Is Jesse Lennox a better horse trainer or a better hockey player? Because I know y'all are on the same intramural league, beer league hockey team.
Yeah, we were the beer league champions last season. Jesse missed that championship game because he was showing horses. But I'll tell you what, the scouts still come to our games, and they wrote down his number the other night because he scored a beautiful backhanded goal, which was redemption for him. And keep in mind that his dad, Dana, joined us and subbed in for the game. And Jesse got a penalty in the first period. And we all rode out there together. I said, this is going to be a long ride home. You're going to hear it from your dad. And then Jesse scored a beautiful goal to make up for it. Right. No offense to Jesse being Canadian and everything else, but I think if he was going to be a pro hockey player versus a professional horse trainer, that probably would have happened by now. But I'll tell you what, Jesse and I have a lot of fun playing. It's a great way to blow off some steam. And even during futurity this past year, we played a game, and it's a great stress reliever. And Jesse is a great guy to have on the bench because he's so positive and, telling the team, let's go, let's keep going. And so he's definitely a good player. And I'd love to see if the scouts are going to call him up, this coming year, but
there's still a shot.
There's still a shot. Yeah. But he shouldn't quit his day job, to start training for hockey full time.
What was, as a kid, what was your favorite cartoon?
My favorite cartoon was probably G.I. Joe.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. G.I. Joe, the American hero.
What scares you?
What scares me? Not being there for my children and my wife. That probably scares me the most because they are the most important thing in my life outside of my faith in God. And my life is so full because of them that if I'm not there for them, that scares me.
Beautiful. Okay, buddy, last one. If you could put a message on a billboard, metaphorically speaking, to get it out to millions of people, what would your message say?
Show up.
Show up.
You got to show up. You can't hide. You can't run. You got to show up.
I love it.
In everything you do.
I love it. Drew Knowles, thank you very much, my friend. I didn't mention we are here at the XIT in Silverado in Weatherford, Texas. This is the heart of performance horse world. So thank you for opening your doors for us to come in and sit down.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It
Yes,
was
sir.
fun.
Yes, sir. You bet.
Yeah.